to this. Oh, oops, okay. No, you're good. And so there's no answers to the questions, and not all the questions are mine. I have to put that out there. I did take some of them from the reading guide that came with the book. So we'll go one by one, and you can select a category and a topic within that category, and then that'll be the question that gets posted to the group, and whoever chooses answers first. And I guess Melanie is going to demonstrate first, so take it away.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to pick locations, Paris.
So Marion initially leaves her father's farm to find something that belonged to her and her alone, which leads her to Paris. Despite ending up where she began, do you think she has achieved this goal? Why or why not? Did her love story surprise you? What do you think the future holds for her?
I love this aspect of the story. I thought was really interesting because it's kind of the reverse of what you read about so much and what you see so much in stories and movies and TV. You know, everyone is always like, you need to, leave your home and go have a grand adventure and go and like and leave your home to find what you want. And so I thought it was really interesting that she did that, but didn't seem like she was super satisfied because she ended up just working as a maid or a housekeeper for a family. And it seemed like she really found her purpose when she returned home to her father's farm. So I thought that was interesting. So yeah, I don't know if she really ended up, it seemed like she didn't really feel like she met her goal in Paris. It seemed like she was kind of disappointed with what kind of her life turned out to be there. But she did meet her, was it Victor that she was in love with? Was that her love? Of the brothers, Victor or Julian?
The older one, I don't remember.
Yeah, so she found Victor, and it ended up being like her great love. So that was, I guess that's part of her goal. So yes, it seems like it was a mixed situation, as so often life is, right?
I think she found what she already had all along, that she was capable of great love, because
Yes.
she had great love for her father, and it was the same thing she felt for Victor. So
Yeah.
she didn't need to leave that place to find that, because it was always there. So I thought they did a good job with her. I mean, I thought she did a good job with that. So did she achieve what she did? I don't know. I think she already had it already in her. I don't think she needed to go somewhere to find it, much like I think most of us do. We adventure out, but we find out now that it was there with us all along. That's the way I took her. And I thought she's probably one of my favorite characters in the story.
Agreed. Yeah.
I think maybe it took her leaving the place she grew up to realize that she had this love all along. And I think that she didn't find anything she didn't have, but she realized what she already had. And I think that kind of would be my answer to the question. Okay. Does anyone else have anything to say about this question? If not, we'll move on to the next. Okay. Okay. Next, I guess we could do Liz.
Motherhood for 100. Alec?
Okay. The book begins with Hanny making a great sacrifice to save her daughter and ends with Ava doing the same. What do these women share? Is it possible to love someone else's children as if they were your own?
Wow. Well, Hanny, of course, is the mother. And so she knows the child, and she would do anything to protect her child and to sacrifice herself because she has to take care of her own mother. And in real life, that's often the situation that women in the Holocaust found themselves in. They were caregivers, and so they couldn't escape. They were trapped. So for her, it's clear. Ava, on the other hand, was initially programmed to do that she was something of a robot, and she was told, this is your prime directive, this is what you have to do. But over time, it becomes something that she owns herself and not just the way she's made. So certainly they share a sense of sacrifice, a sense of obligation, and a love for this child. Is it possible to love someone else's children as if they're your own? Certainly, of course they are. And we saw that with Marianne too. Wasn't she the one that smuggled groups of children across the border? And that was another reason she was such a remarkable character, was that the self-sacrifice and the love that she had for other people that had nothing to do with her. They certainly weren't her own children.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the story is all about the people who are sacrificing for the children. I mean, you have the priest, you have the farmers, you have everybody sacrificing for the welfare of the children. I think with the question with Hanny and Ava is that both of them, I mean, both of these women had an opportunity to escape for personal gain, but neither did. Ava had quite a few opportunities, and the mother could have done as well, but she didn't, which I think is very representative of that period. If we've read the history, so that's the way I look at it, is that everybody here is making a great sacrifice for the children, and that's the beauty of the story, and I think that's what draws me to it. And I mean, Raina knows that, things we work on. So Raina, that's my answer to your $1 million question.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible for people to love other children as if they were their own. I mean, that's where adoption comes in. I mean, it's very possible, and I can see, particularly in an extreme situation, how you would definitely feel protective of children, even if they weren't yours.
Yeah, I don't have any experience remotely within like motherhood or anything like that, but I think taking from a lot of Holocaust stories that I have heard, in times of crisis, you form bonds, like really tight bonds with other people, and especially people who have lost their parents. You try to cling on to that, you try to find a parental role wherever you can. And so I think, finding those bonds together is very strong, and in itself is, I think, equatable to a mother and daughter bond, even if it's not, the same thing, or even in the same nature. It is just as strong. Okay. Oh. Okay, Mr. Davidson, your turn.
Oh, let's do magical realism for 6,000.
Okay. This novel is both historical fiction and magical realism. How does Alice Hoffman achieve her unique writing style? What details does she use from each genre? What do each add to the emotional content of the story?
Oh, I would need time to really go back and give you an example from each one. But does she achieve it? For sure. And then the interesting thing is, because magical realism, it was born from Europe during this period, and it made its way to South America and then up to North America. So I found it refreshing that was in this particular story. I like that a lot. The genre thing, I think what was really cool about what she did was using the bird, the heron. That was really, really interesting. And as far as adding to the emotional content, what I thought was very, very interesting as far as magical realism goes is that she was not the only one that could recognize the value of the heron. The boys were able to, the younger one, not Victor, the other one, he recognized the value, and that's how they were sharing notes with each other. So to answer that question, did she achieve it? I said that on the outset, Raina, that I thought that was one of my favorite parts of this whole story, is how she was able to weave magical realism in, but how the other people could see it. And that's very interesting about magical realism, that you have to be in touch with your spiritual self to participate in it. And so I liked how she used that love connection between those two with that purpose. So I thought that was very well done.
Yeah, personally, my favorite scene in the book was the moment when Ava and the heron were dancing and singing to each other. And I think it was, who was it that was watching? I think it was I don't know. Somebody was watching and they were just saying how beautiful it was that they were singing to each other and dancing and communicating with each other. And just in my mind's eye, like that scene was just so beautiful. And I think it was when they were at the convent and they were by the silver roses. And so just imagining that in my brain was just.
You know, Raina, to that point, there were several people that saw her dancing with the heron. That's what was really cool about it, because you get a sense of that all of these people are very, very well. I mean, they're living a life beyond their normal life, and that's what I was talking about. You know, they're in tune with their spiritual self, and I thought that's what she did a good job. She didn't let the heron just belong to Ava. She let the heron belong to multiple people in the story, but Ava certainly had the most. I mean, obviously the greatest relationship. But I agree with you. I thought that was really, really beautiful.
I think one thing, though, if I do have to bring in a negative point anywhere, is that while there were a lot of like magical elements, especially with Ava and everything around there, I felt like, especially within Eddie's story, that her like own capabilities to produce magic kind of got lost as the book went along. Like at the beginning, she was so passionate, like she wanted to do this. All the men were able to do this. She had observed them. She knew that she could do it. And then as she gets later on in the book, I feel like she lost that and she didn't talk about it any. And I guess you could justify it that she was just so focused on saving other people and dealing with the situation at hand. But I felt like bringing more magical elements into her story could have made it more powerful and could have helped with like her character development as the story went on.
You know, Raina, I agree with you, because I think of all the characters, especially the female characters, Eddie's is the one I mentioned earlier. That character really needed more development, in my opinion, because everything's centered on her capabilities and her willingness to really go against her mom and her father, especially her dad, who's this rabbi. But then you see at the very end, she literally sacrifices her entire self for this cause that she believes in. I mean, sexually and to the point of death. I mean, she really does. So I agree that's the character I would have really, because if you know the history of especially the women who fought in this underground, these were some bold women. And I really, that was the one disappointment. I thought I would have loved to have seen that character develop a little bit more.
I agree. She was so promising in the beginning that we were inside her head and we could see the conflicts and the anger she had. And then she got dropped.
Yeah.
And she, just fizzled out. We didn't get to see her reach any kind of fulfillment or that character be.
Yeah. And as a writer, and Liz, I totally agree. And as a writer, that was one of the things that I thought, it's like, you just kill the character off at the end. It's like, no, don't just kill her like that. I really kind of thought, I was hoping there would be something more to that, because she was willing to sacrifice. She did from the very beginning. She literally sacrificed everything. So I agree, Liz. That was kind of a disappointment for me.
Okay. Kate, I know you haven't read it, but go ahead. Choose one.
Can you tell me which is an easy one to start with? I'm not going to do any of the characters. So let's do 1944.
The ending of this novel leaves a lot of things unsaid. Were you happy with where each character ended up by the end? If not, what would you have changed? Okay, I don't want to spoil anything for you. You might have to plug your ears a bit.
Okay. Well, I suspect that I would have wanted everyone to live happily ever after, and I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. So that's my disappointment.
Sorry about that, Kate.
Someone else, please chime in. I will pretend to not know.
I personally, I was kind of confused by the end of the book. I wasn't exactly sure what had happened, and I had to go back and read it, I think, twice. Like the last chapter, I read it twice, just because I was like, what happened? I wasn't sure who had lived, who had died. Like, I knew some of the characters, like that was finite, but like about Ava, I didn't understand what exactly had happened. And so I had to go back and read it. But I actually was quite satisfied with the ending. Although it wasn't exactly what I had imagined going into it, I thought that it was done very well. And after reading the book, I wasn't left wanting more. I thought that it sat well with me what had happened to everyone, even though I don't think that it was deserved for everyone, but I do think that it was well done and I was satisfied with it.
I think it was okay for me as an ending, and I agree, Rain. It was a little bit ambiguous, and I had to go back and check it again. But to me, I think this had been a more powerful story if you would have had the Marianne, a main character, 20 years later telling the story and going back, because then I get to see the development of these characters, whether they are married and they're still together and they're on their farm or they're doing whatever. I thought that would be a better way to tell that overall story, because it's just, to me, it's one of those, it almost borderline like a little bit soap opera to me, to where all of a sudden some people lived, some people die, and we're done. And because there's such strength of some of the actions, I would have liked to see a little bit much something more rounded at the end about where they were in the end.
Well, with so many books, that's always the choice. Do they wrap it all up in a bow for you with like the after credits kind of slideshow of what happened, or do they want to leave that to your imagination? What do you? Because sometimes, what you imagine is happily ever after for the characters is not what the author envisioned. So,
well, I think for me, okay, when you blow somebody up, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's what I was talking about. I was like,
that one's clean
okay.
cut.
Yeah, and then I mean, some of those like that were, but then again, I think, Kate, for me, again, it's just because I'm a character type person, and I just really wanted a little bit more about the characters, because there was so much personal sacrifice because of what the characters do, and I just, selfishly want to know how they're going to do 10 years from now. Give me that. But maybe that's in book 2.
Got to leave room for the sequel.
Yeah, let's hope we don't have that. As far as bad things.
Were you going to say something?
No, just to restate that I think we were dissatisfied with what happened to Eddie, not so much with what happened to her, but that her character wasn't developed, so that we didn't feel satisfied when she met her end, that we wanted more. But we were happy with Marianne, that she found herself, without going into too much detail for Kate, but that she may have suffered losses, but she herself will be strong at the end.
Yeah, I agree, Liz. I mean, it's right on, because Eddie, I mean, as a man, I love the fact that she challenged her dad in that religion, the history of that religion, that she was wise enough to know. And you get a sense that, and Kate, that's what I'm talking about. Her father's this very, very well-respected rabbi, but this girl would never be able to have that same height in society. And clearly she was already had that wisdom and had that ability and that soul. And that's why, from the start, it's like, oh man, let this person just rock this thing all the way through. And then when I saw her just taking smaller and smaller pieces to that very end, it's like, why?
I wonder if, I don't know if this was planned by the author, but I wonder if it's just because of grief, with losing her sister, and that is kind of, I don't know, it was representative of what grief can do to you, makes you smaller sometimes. And, she had the potential to be so strong and so powerful, but she was overcome with the grief for her sister, losing her sister, and was never able to kind of find her life and her footing after that. Maybe that, I don't know.
But Melly, but this girl's, remember, she knew what she was going to have to do sexually to take this guy down.
Absolutely.
So she goes to the doctor and says, I don't want this guy to be the first. I'm aware. She was so aware of so much that that's why I was like, oh, don't put her in that position. Why are we going to put her in that position with the most reckless guy there who that's why I don't know. I'm gonna have to call Alice. I'll have to call Alice and have a conversation with her about that.
Right? We have to say, yeah.
We didn't like that. I can see that the grief would have shrunk her, but I would like to have heard about that.
Right.
I heard about it knocked her legs out from under her, and it kept her from being as bold as she would otherwise have been.
Yeah, you're right, Liz.
I want to see it.
Yes.
Because it was so cool how she kept talking about her sister when they were running from that train, and and how she lost her sister in that moment, and she was living to take care of that business, and that's a powerful thing. She was the most powerful character in the story to me, and there just need to be more. But out of respect for Kate, I'll just stop talking about it. So.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to mention is the Mother Superior. She's my favorite character in this book. And I know her story was so short within it. Like, it took up a microscopic part of the book compared to everything else. But wow, she really impacted me when I was reading this book. And I was actually very satisfied with her. And I think out of all the character lines within this book, that was the one that I was the most satisfied with and was pleased with the most, just because I loved her story so much, and I thought that it was done very well, the way that she sacrificed herself to save the hundreds of children that she was taking care of, and also hearing why, because I saw that character development, and I think she was the most well-developed character in the book.
Looks like we just got a new person joining us. So welcome, Mr. Mall.
Thank you. I'll stay on mute and silent with the video off.
Oh, you're fine. We chit chatting here. Actually, Raina, do you want to go back to your Jeopardy board for another question?
All right.
So, Mr. Mole, we've been kind of picking from different topics to generate some questions. And as you're the last one in, you're welcome to choose from any of these topics if you'd like to spark a question for us.
Sorry, I'm late. Let me just catch up. I'll watch and join in when I can.
Okay, we'll skip you.
All right. Has everybody here gone? I think so. I guess I could do one. I don't remember every single question and what they go with, so it's okay. I guess we haven't done a character one yet, so I will do Julian for 200. Okay. Julian and Victor Levy are brothers with very different paths. How does each handle their wartime experience? What do they share despite their differences, and what aspects of their past influences them the most? I found Julian and Victor very interesting because they were polar opposites in so many different areas, but they were very similar in others. And I think the most similar thing that comes from their past and their relationship with their family was the love that they had and how they acted for the ones that they loved. They sacrificed a lot for the people that they loved, and they gave their love wholeheartedly. And I think on their journey within the book and their wartime experiences, that was when they found love, because they realized that without it, they were very lost and they didn't have anything to live for. And so I think that is what ties them together as similar. But they were very different in all other aspects. I thought that Victor was very reckless. He, loved and did everything with just reckless abandon. Like he just knew that life is short, and he just went for everything. Whereas Julian, I thought, was very calculated. And I think you can see that especially, a pun, calculated, because he was so good at math. And I think that was a metaphor for how calculated he was in life. And he thought everything through so meticulously. And I think one passage within the book that really shows that was when they were taking the group of men away. I don't know if it was just men, but taking the group away, and he was counting steps and seeing how he could get out of line to hide in order to escape what he was in. And I think that just shows the big difference between the two, is how calculated one is and how reckless the other.
I saw it as their influence is they're certainly influenced by their father, and the father, the mathematician, where Julian is, he's closer to the younger. Again, I agree with you. Victor's very reckless. He's the risk taker. But what I thought was interesting about Julian is this guy. He's living with survivor's guilt. He has a lot of guilt about how lucky he is and how fortunate he is in all these different situations. And he mentions that throughout the story, where Victor is the one who wants to leave home. He wanted out. He didn't want to be a part of what his parents were. And the thing about Julian could have escaped early on, but he didn't, because of the guilt he felt for his parents. And so that's what I thought was really interesting about the two different characters, that where they're both brothers, but they couldn't be more different than one another. That one was already gone. He was just waiting for the opportunity, and he does leave, where Julian does have the opportunity, but he doesn't stay because of what he feels, even though he knows that there's trouble on the horizon. So it's not surprising then that Victor, oh, sorry, Kate, but it's not surprising what happens to Victor as opposed to Julian at the end. But I thought it was interesting for the author to use two brothers like that. I thought that was very well done.
It felt like at first that Victor was the one who was best suited for the war because of his temperament, that he was a man of action, that he didn't like studying. He didn't like a mathematician father who had these academic expectations, but he understood how to live in Paris during the war, that he was well suited for that. And Julian had to learn how to live during that time. So I thought that was another contrast between the two of them, that for Victor, this was his moment.
Right. And Liz, I think that's what foreshadows what's going to happen to Eddie, because she ends up with Victor and not Julian in the situation. Raina, I hope you saw your teacher use foreshadowing there.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. Mr. Mole, would you like to choose one now?
Well, I'm shooting in the dark, so why don't we pick the Leah and the magical realism?
Oh, we've done that one.
Okay.
Sorry.
What have you not done?
Over.
What have you not done?
We have done, I'll tell you the ones we have done. We have done 1944, Julian, magical realism, motherhood, and Paris. All the others are still on the table.
All right, let's go to 1943 and Etty.
1943 was a very eventful year, including the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and a majority of mass deportations to death camps. While this book doesn't mention many outside events, how can our knowledge of outside events help us understand the novel better?
Oh, you know what? I'll say something, Raina, that if you and I were sitting in class, this is one of the things that I can see it. I see as bothersome in some things, especially shows you watch now on television. A lot of inferring has to go on here. For me, I didn't have a problem with the dates because I know what's going on in the dates. I thought the author really should have maybe layered some things in there that were going on, because when I jumped from 1941 to 1943 and everybody's still kind of doing their thing, maybe we should have had a little bit more going on there. So I think outside events should have been a little bit more in there. I think would have made it an even better novel, especially for people, and I'm thinking, Raina, younger people, that to introduce them to this, you don't need to put all the history in there, but I think a little bit of history would have been a good tie-in here.
Especially I would agree. I wish that there had been just a bit more, just to help us with the timeline of things. Like, I understood fairly well what happened in sequence, but I felt like there was a bit missing from that. And if she had just put more in about like more deportations are going on, or the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, just those things to kind of help benchmark the story, I think it could have put it more into perspective. And I understand in some parts, like when they are walking through the woods, like they wouldn't know what was going on in other parts of the world at that time. But I wish, especially when they are at Julian and Victor's house, like they would have seen things and heard things on the radio that would have inspired action or would have made them feel certain ways. And I wish that that had been more of an aspect within the book.
Yeah, because history does tell us that a lot of people in those areas didn't even know Auschwitz. They didn't know a lot of these places were existing. And I thought some of them, I thought like had too much information about maybe what they would knew what was going on. But again, I think what that might be is because the author does, because I did a little bit of research on her, again, with magical realism and the whole fairy tale type of story, where she didn't want to get bogged down too much with that, because it's not allowing to tell the fairy tale type of story with the woods, the heron, the dancing, all that kind of stuff.
So did we get the impression that the characters in the story were naive to the events that were going on around them, or just that the author just didn't show it to the audience?
I think that the characters knew. My problem with it is I'm not sure from historically a lot of the characters would have really known that much about what was going on, especially from where they were living in the wood. I mean, in the farms and stuff. Again, but that's a hit and miss thing, because history tells you some people knew things that were going on, some people didn't know too much. But again, that's just my prejudice with the story. I think I would have liked just a little bit more history embedded in it.
I think there were places where she could have put a bit more detail, not necessarily saying like, this is when the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising is happening and this is when this is happening, but maybe just more general wartime information about what life was like when they're part of the resistance and they're taking children across the border and things. I wish that there had been more detail about what that was like from a historical point of view.
And Raina, based upon what I've read of her with this story, and she does talk about it, those books have been written. I think she really wanted this love story, this fairy tale love story, and I think it has its place in that. Again, that's just my prejudice as like a history kind of buff. But the thing that I remember about the story is, because I know all those things are out there, and I can go get another book about it. But I think it was just a sacrifice of just this ultimate sacrifice of love. That makes this a great love story. Sorry, Kate, I don't want to ruin it for you, but yes.
I'll tell you, it didn't bother me that she didn't spell everything out. Maybe because I read a lot of Holocaust stuff. And in fact, I was excited that she would subtly reference things that I knew were going on, like the velodrome in Paris, where people were gathered together, that she called it that. And I went, oh yeah, that's the velodrome. Or when she talked about the village in Paris that was isolated where people could escape, where people did escape, and she called it out by name. And that was okay for me to just go, oh yeah, that's that place.
Right.
Or the crypto Jew, the Mother Superior who was secretly Jewish, that those sorts of things that really happened that felt like they were researched. It was okay with me that she didn't stop and explain it all to me. I can look it up later.
Yeah, I agree with you, Liz. Like the stadium, those people are going to be slaughtered. She didn't go down that road. She just gets Julian out of that situation. I agree with it. I guess again, and Raina knows better than but to me, it's like I want everything. I want all that stuff in there so we can rage against it. But again, this is a love story, and I think if you keep in that perspective, ultimately, that what I take away from this is again that women are just so much more capable of that kind of strength than I think men are, and I think history doesn't tell that story enough, and I think she did a good job with that. So, Raina, don't tell anybody I said that.
I think, I like things to be spelled out in books just because, I don't know, I just like that within a book. But I understand what y'all are saying about how this book really lends itself to that. I think it has its time and place. And while, we want all of this extra detail, you have to make some sacrifices for the sake of the story. And I think if there had been too many details in it about historical timeline, it would have taken away from the true moral of the story, which is just about how love conquers all. I guess if you had to sum the book up into one big moral, it's love conquers all. And I thought from that kind of perspective, thinking about it now, I think that it was well done. All right, let's see. Slide 2. I guess we will go back to the beginning. Melanie.
All right. Okay, I am gonna stick with my locations and I'm gonna do Berlin.
Yes.
This novel opens in Berlin. Do you believe that 1941 Berlin was portrayed accurately?
Can't really say it.
Aside from the magical aspects.
Some of the others.
Aside from the magical aspects.
I guess I think it was. I mean, you're just in Berlin for such a short amount of time. And then, and then you're on the train and you're off to France. So I think having Ava be a connection to the mom and be a way to tell the story of what happened to the mom and the grandma and how, not long after they left, the Jewish quarters were cleared out and everything. I think that was interesting. So that gave you an idea of what happened after they left. But I think the opening scenes, with the, foraging for food and the encounter with the Nazi officer, I really liked the phrase that something about how evil came really slowly and then all at once. I liked that kind of phrase in the beginning in Berlin. I thought that kind of portrayed it, how it was, how it might have really felt like it happened. So yeah.
I thought what was interesting about the opening scene of the book was, I don't know if I want to go here, but I know, Liz, you've done a lot of presentations about women's experience within the Holocaust. And I think within, with the Nazi officer and the sexual harassment that had occurred, I know at the time it did happen, but it was a lot more rare just because of the fact that Jews were viewed as subhuman. And so I thought that was interesting, that was the opening scene of the book, just because I know that it didn't happen very frequently. And of course it did happen, and this is a story where it did happen, but I just thought that was interesting. And Liz, you could probably speak more to this because you're well researched within that, but yeah.
I won't add much, just that it was I'd forgotten that. I read it a week or two ago, the menace and the mother having to save the daughter. That struck me more than the sexual threat. But that's true. It may have been less since Jews were considered subhuman, but Jews would still perceive the threat. Women would still be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was perfect opening because you do see that, and then it sets the precedence for the rest of the novel. That again, you have the one thing that belongs to the woman, and it's the purity of the self, that virginity that is this young woman, and that one action takes everything going from that point on, because she speaks on that over and over again, how she remembers the force of him, the bite on the lip. All that took so much away from her. And they knew then that they were going to have to sacrifice. And that literally gets the whole story rolling. So 1941 Berlin, I think, is so important. And Raina, what you're talking about, is it recorded that these women suffered, all of them suffer like this? And no, but the fact of the matter is only one has to suffer like this. And if it's somebody's daughter, then that's all that needs to happen. It doesn't need to happen to everybody's daughter, but it happened to her daughter. and that gets the story going. I thought it was a really, really good way to kick this thing off.
I thought that it was very, very powerful how the mother came and intervened in the situation. I thought when I read that, it just took my breath away. I thought that that was just such a powerful moment that is a sentiment to a mother's love, that she was willing, because once you do something like that, like it changes you forever. And she made that sacrifice without even thinking, just because she loved her daughter so much. And I think, to your point, Mr. Davidson, that it did really set up the rest of the novel, just because she did it without thinking. And again, love is such a big theme in this book.
Well, and then the girl doesn't even understand that she's pretty. She goes home and starts cutting all her hair. I mean, she physically, emotionally changes at that point in time. And that's why that's so important. And there is even the mention there, the first recognition of the angel of death at the very start of that we really start to see Ava talking about that moment in that alleyway. I think that was so important, because remember, mom was just going through the store that she used to know very well, pilfering for what she could get, and all of a sudden this is happening to the daughter on the outside. So you take not having things and being hungry to sexual abuse, and that just kicks the whole thing in. And then ironically, Kate, that you see at the very end the sacrifice of the woman again to make something good happen, and using that same vessel, that same body to do it. I thought that was very well done.
Liz.
Loss. Loss for 200.
Leia's mother's voice is heard throughout the novel in italicized section. The loss of a mother and the loss of a child is central to the story. How are the long-lasting effects of loss woven throughout the novel?
Well, some of that we talked about when we talked about Julian's survivor guilt, that he feels like he has to keep going on and he has to live a certain way because he was lucky enough to survive and his parents weren't. We don't see it as much with Leia, interestingly enough, at least not explicitly. Not the same way that we do with Julian.
Liz, what I thought was cool is you hear almost Leia's argument like a teenager would argue with her mother through Ava. They had that relationship where that Leia's hearing this voice of the mother, and she's getting this, and then Ava comes along and, you know what? I don't care what you think about me. Your mom. I'm sorry, guys. That's my dog. Sorry that I'm here as a representative of your mom. So the mom's really never gone because of the character of Ava. And I thought that was really well done, because the mom, excuse me, is really never lost throughout the novel because of that. Excuse me, guys. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that's why she didn't grieve the loss of her mother, because she felt like she still had her mother.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's why she knew she was supposed to kill Ava at the end, and she's not going to do it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting.
Sorry, Kate. Sorry.
I felt that too. I thought, the mother never really died. It is mentioned, her story and her grandmother's story that happens, but I think tying into the magical realism, they know that they're not really, really gone, because their magical stories live within her, especially, the grandmother and the mother and the story of the wolf. And that continues on, and she references that a lot throughout the book. And I think that is her way, along with just Ava being there and being, exactly like her mother in terms of actions and thoughts and, the way that she speaks to her. I thought that is what keeps the parents' memory inside of her, is just that she knows that with those stories, they're never really gone.
We see some other characters who channel their loss in other ways, some more minor characters. For example, the Mother Superior the loss of her father and she channels it into doing good eventually, or Eddie, who channels her loss into anger, like Victor channels it into anger.
Yeah.
And even the doctor, I mean, they spend a little bit of time talking about how the doctor lost his wife to cancer, and how the irony of being a doctor and watching his wife die and not be able to do anything. And then he ends up helping kind of the resistance as well. So I thought I just connected all that along with you as well. Yeah, right there. Yeah. Interesting.
One thing that I did feel like I missed a bit in the book was when Marianne's father died. I feel like we didn't necessarily get a lot of her reaction to that. Like, it is mentioned once or twice, but I feel like because she was so with her father, I feel like we didn't get enough of how that impacted her long term.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Rainey, because he was such a strong, silent type of character that obviously taught this woman so much, that her coming back and forth from going across with these children, to find out. And then there's that part in the author writes, well, don't tell her how he was hanged and things like that. Yeah, I really felt like there was just a little bit missing there again, because again, I'm just that we're going to concentrate on the fairy tale and we don't want to go through too much of the emotion there. But I think personally, he deserved a little bit more than that in that relationship, because to me, maybe because I had a grandfather like that, those are such strong people that even Victor mentions that it would take multiple men to have killed him. And he probably hurt somebody along the way that it deserved a little bit more there.
I do think we kind of see a little bit in the ways that it impacted Julian, because Julian is very touched by his presence. And I think we see that with the bees throughout the story, and the way that that keeps coming back into his life. I think that the father's memory is kept alive through Julian in the ways that he responds to it, because he was the first one that came and saw what had happened. And even though he didn't know him well, that impacted him going forward. Mr. Davidson, your turn.
Let's go with connection.
How do you feel about Ava's relationship with the heron? Are emotions bound to human experience? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but it doesn't hurt.
No, I like I said earlier, I think that was I love that part about it, because again, magical realism, when I teach it because the trick to magical realism is has to be believable. You have to believe it could happen, and I think Hoffman did such a good job with that. So are emotions bound to human experience? For sure. For sure, emotions are bound to human experience. And that's why I think it's interesting how we had different characters sharing the different kinds of experiences, where they were coming from. So yeah, I'm just, 100%. This is my favorite part of the whole book right here.
I don't necessarily think that emotions are bound to human experience.
That's because you're 18.
Within the novel, I think we kind of see that within Ava, because eventually emotions do overtake her and her final decisions, because she wasn't human initially. And I think we see that progression. She turns kind of into a human.
But Raina, you got to remember, how was Ava created? You need to look at the mixture of how she was created, and even how the blood was put into her in that clay. Those are all bound on the human experience, and the three vessels that took in that circle to create Ava. Those are all bound on human experience.
Maybe. I also
just saying.
An interesting thing to bring up would be the heron, because I think that the heron does have some emotional connection to Ava and the other characters. And I know the heron isn't human, but just the fact that the heron was willing to transport the messages between Leia and Julian, I thought that was really interesting, because the heron does say in the book that it's not like I don't exactly know the wording, but that it doesn't owe it to anybody to do that kind of thing. And I think that that was an act of like emotional response because it has a tie to Ava, and the heron has a connection with Ava. And because Ava loves Leia so much, the heron is willing to do this just because it knows that that's one of the things that's keeping them together and well, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, Rainey, I think you bring up a good point because remember, Hoffman's talking about this really comes down to what it has a soul. And that's the beauty of magic, the realism, because the heron has a soul and it's connected to these characters. So it becomes not so much about the rational human being because we're obviously living in a time of very irrational behavior. So the soul overwhelmed, that's why Ava can hear. And remember, she even teaches the kid to start speaking to the birds and listening to the birds. And then you have the old man with the frogs swallowing the frogs. All this is about another level of a human existence. So I think that's why I think the heron, if you were to talk about characters, the great characters in this story, the heron is a great character in this story.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I also thought was interesting, and it was mentioned so briefly at the beginning of the novel, was when Ava is first leaving with Hanny after she was created, and she hears a dog barking, and she knows that the dog is a golem too. And she says something. I need to find it because this one thing was like, ooh. I need to find it really quickly, but she says something about how they do everything for the humans, and the humans never give anything to them back. Oops, somebody's joining us. And I thought that that was interesting. I thought that that was some sort of emotional response, was the dog's kind of like outward expression of I am unhappy. And that unhappiness, I think, is a very strong emotion. So I wouldn't say that emotions are bound to the human experience just because we see that part in the book.
Down, Bruno.
Speaking of dogs.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you've read Raina, if you've read Bless Me Ultima, it's the same thing with the owl and the character with the owl, that these animals can take on spiritual levels, and that we can be in tune with that if we're in tune with the soul aspect and not a rational behavior aspect. And that's why I'm excited about this, Raina, this novel, because Raina, I've told you about the work we do, is that I'm looking forward to young people writing more stories like this based upon the atrocities that we're seeing today. If they can bring in a spiritual aspect with the horrific, that I think will help so many generations. But Raina, I'm sorry, I'm going down that road. I apologize.
You're all good. Most of the questions are just a guiding thing. We can talk about whatever. I guess, Kate, it's your turn again.
All right. Let's see. Have we done 41 yet?
No, we have not. And real quick, I found the quote.
Go for it.
She said, she gazed a little. As they walked along, she spied a black dog in a fenced yard. She gazed into its eyes. Was this what she was, a beast such as this? The dog was chained, and when it barked plaintively, Ava saw something inside her chest. Ava felt something inside her chest tighten. They must do as they were told. They were bound to humans, but humans were not bound to them. And then, hurry, Hanny called when Ava lingered at the fence, listening to what the dog had to say. A litany filled with loyalty and despair. Do what they say, but don't think they will ever hear you in return. All right. So the next question, that's kind of a sad quote, but how does the opening line of "If you do not believe in evil, you are doomed to live in a world you will never understand" set the tone for the rest of the novel? Do you think this statement is true?
Well, based on the fact that I know this has a lot of magical elements in it, I'm thinking that if you don't believe in evil, you don't really believe in good, supernatural things either. And so there would be aspects of life that aren't explainable. So I would imagine this is setting up the sort of spiritual element for the rest of the novel. I'm sure it works great in the novel. I'm personally, a non-believer of all sorts, so I don't feel that confused. But it's open to interpretation. So I think probably those in the group who have a more spiritual connection to things probably agree with that statement more profoundly than the non-believers like myself. But I'm sure it is reinforced in the novel through her themes because she is using magical elements in it.
I had a history teacher once in middle school, and he said that the fundamental question of every single religion is whether humans are born good or evil, or if it is something that we acquire throughout our entire lives. And I think that this quote is one perspective of that. And I think it sets up kind of the Jewish ideology within the book. And I don't necessarily know if I think it's true or not. I do think that a lot of hate in the world leads to the awful things that happen. But I don't necessarily know, if you don't understand evil, that you're doomed to not understand the world around you. I do think that understanding the way that hate kind of perpetrates a lot of awful things in the world is essential to understanding the course of history. But I think there is beauty in naiveness sometimes, and being within just a blissful state of the world is a good place and at its core is a very good place, is actually quite beautiful. And I don't know exactly where I'm getting with this, but I don't know. I don't know if I believe it or not.
I think that, and I teach this in literature, and I guess my experience around the world, that and Raina, I think your history teacher is alluding to this. Man is, and if you go and you look at the Jewish history and the histories of the religious world, that man is innately evil, and if you give man the opportunity to do as he wishes, based upon people's apathy and unwillingness to see clearly, then you're not going to understand what's coming your way until it's too late. And she does a good job of this with the boy's father. And we know historically, a lot of people did not leave Germany during this period in time because they could not believe, they wrapped their brains around that this kind of evil existed. They weren't going to. And we see that today, Raina, we talk about this still, that we still see this today, that we cannot believe that this evil exists. And if you don't believe evil exists, then you can't comprehend the things that are going on around you. You can certainly try to make sense of it in the best way. But I think to the question that you pose here, does it set the tone for the novel? That, yeah, I think it absolutely set the tone for this, because you're seeing it in a case where people are not going to believe that this kind of evil exists and can do terrible things.
I'm going to disagree, because I don't think that was the tone of the novel. This was a novel about love. It was about sacrifice and love, and it wasn't really about evil. There's some evil in there, but I think we see more of the love and sacrifice than we see the evil.
But you can't recognize this evil or this love unless you have one or the other. And that's where I think she does a good job, and the magical realism comes in, because you can't recognize and appreciate the love unless you're understanding what the evil is that's making this love rise to the level that it does rise to.
I think that's a fair point, that we have, this opening line of, you have to understand the evil in the world. And then, like Liz said, the story is about love. And so I think that's just setting up the tone and proving that this quote, at least within the novel, is true, because you have an understanding of this evil within the opening scene, and then all of this love that comes from it in the end, toward the end of the book. So maybe not necessarily in the world as a whole, like the world that we live in, but at least within the novel. I think if you think of the novel as like one big thing, it proves the opening line of the book. Who has not gone? I guess we can. I could choose one. We haven't done a lot of. We've done 2 locations. I guess I will go with Rhone Valley. So, the convent in the Rhone Valley is described as being a beautiful place filled with flowers and gorgeous architecture. How does this description of the location go hand in hand with Sister Marie's actions and her storyline in general? So as I said, Sister Marie was my favorite character. I felt very connected to her story within the novel. And I think the convent is just an overall representation of the purity of her heart and her intentions. And you can see that from her childhood, the way that, everyone told her, don't talk to your grandfather. He's a hostile person, leave him alone. And she goes to him and she's so kind to him. And they end up forming this really special relationship with each other. And I think her entire storyline is just a storyline of love and sacrifice and the things that she's willing to do for the greater good, and the ways that she loves unconditionally, even with people that she has just met. And I don't know, I could rage on and on about Sister Marie just because I loved her so much and her actions and the way that she sacrificed everything. And I don't know, I just identified a lot with her, even though
So would you say that the flowers and the architecture and the beautiful setting are a reflection of her character's warmth and love, and is a cue that she's a good person when you encounter her?
Yeah, I think it sets the tone for what she does. And even though she's not there at the beginning of the book, I think it definitely shows who she is. And I know it is mentioned that she was born very wealthy. And I like that wealth doesn't influence her character within the book, because it is made blatantly clear that she does come from money. And within that, even though she was privileged in that sense, she lost a lot as a young child. And, losing her parents, and then shortly after building such a strong connection with her grandfather, and then losing him, and then having to lose all of these children that she had taken in. I don't know. I just think that really shows, the beauty of her. And I think the silver roses are a great metaphor for her beauty as a human being, because she's
Right.
one of a kind.
And Raina, I think this is like a really good question. You got this piece you guys put in here, because the flowers and the architecture are great motifs that run throughout this story. And you have these beautiful comments, these huge structures, but the farm is just as beautiful. The farm itself is just as beautiful. And, the honeybees, they're just as beautiful. But the flowers throughout, the silver flowers. But I think overall, it's like I see that you can't kill the essence of, no matter how evil and how dark this is, you can't kill the essence of beauty. And I thought she did a good job with using these motifs. And again, I think ultimately love wins throughout. And history shows us the sacrifice of people and the love ultimately wins over the evil. So I think I like this question here a lot. But the motifs of flowers and the architecture that ran throughout this is well done.
Sorry, I was just charging my computer. Okay. And thank you. This is my favorite question. I came up with this one. Let's see. I guess we will do Melanie. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Let's see. What haven't we done yet? I guess we could do Vienne, location Vienne. I know we haven't done that.
Eddie goes to Vienne while mourning the loss of her sister. How does Vienne continue to serve as the purpose as a place of mourning throughout the novel?
I guess, is Vienne the place, is it the church with the priest that Julian and Victor kind of go to? Is that? I think so, right?
I think so, yes.
Right. So I think it's kind of like, it seems, it's one of those, it's like a stopping point for people. So I think that's where Julian learns that Victor, his brother from the priest, he learned that his brother had died, and then moves on. So I don't know if people stay there too long though to actually mourn, or if they just keep moving. You know, it's like a place where like a stopping point before they headed off into different areas. And,
Yeah, Melanie, they couldn't stay for more than 3 days.
right. Yeah.
And I like that because, again, it's the action of the story. It's like mourning's not going to do everything you need to do. You need to kind of pick up your pieces and move forward. To me, I think this is a really important soft-spoken part of the story. I like that. I like the part that, you can stay here and recover, get a little food in yourself, feel the pain, but you got to get out there and get back to your purpose in life, especially where Julian, in my opinion, is concerned.
Yeah.
I think that this goes really well with just the Jewish perspective of death in general, because within Judaism, you have a 7-day mourning period after someone dies, where you cover the mirrors and you lose yourself within the grief, and you're allowed to feel the grief within those 7 days. But then after that, even though, overall you have like a year of actual mourning time, you're kind of forced to move on and live your life. And I think, bringing in some of the Jewish aspects into the book, I think that Vienne served that purpose of, here's your time to mourn, now you need to move on. And it goes along with Judaism really well.
And Raina, again, because the ultimate goal is to get these kids across the border.
Yeah.
And sitting there and just mourning, it's not going to take care of that. And I thought she did a good job with that. I really thought this is really one of the soft-spoken parts of the story that was so significant. Good question.
How much time do we have left? Just, I don't know.
What time do you normally go to, Raina? That's my first time.
You have up to 10 more minutes.
Oh, okay.
If no one has any more questions and we've wrapped them all up, then you can certainly end before 7, but we like to wrap it up no later than 7.
Okay, just checking. We'll do one more question and then we can move on. Liz, your turn.
Okay. Let's go to characters. Did we do Ava?
Yes.
Okay. Did we do Eddie? We've talked a lot about her. Actually, you know what? Let's do Leia. The protagonist, and maybe we've talked the least about her. Here we go. Okay.
We learn halfway through the book that Hanny instructed her daughter to destroy Ava once Leia is brought to safety. Why do you think Leia defies her mother? Do you think she made the right decision? What may have changed her mind?
Well, I guess spoilers here. She comes to love and appreciate Ava and see Ava as not just her mother's surrogate, but as an independent person, someone she loves for herself, and not just because she's the representation of her mother. Was it the right thing to do? Sure. We all love a happy ending. I mean, maybe later on there are great repercussions in the structure of the world because this golem was supposed to be destroyed, but for now we're happy.
Yeah, I agree with Liz, because we see Leia becomes a full circle character. She has that whole development, and she can destroy her because Ava's so special. Ava's the mother figure throughout this.
Mm-hmm. I think, Liz, you were saying how like great repercussions in the world, but I think that within Ava's character development, she begins as this like, you can tell that she's a mythical creature just because she's so beautiful and she has this essence that draws people in and they can't look away from her. They talk about that a lot in the book. Like, people just know that she's not a human. But as the book goes on, you see her take on more human qualities, like when she pricks her finger on the rose and a drop of blood comes out. And I think if you go back to the folklore of the golem within the book, they want you to kill the golem because the golem will eventually turn into a real being capable of doing actions on its own and define what it was created to do. And I think that's why they're always told to kill the golem, and that the golem is dangerous because the golem will take on free will. And I guess if you want to say that that's inherently bad, that's why they want you to kill the golem.
Or
You know,
maybe
Raina, I'm sorry, let's go ahead.
God. Maybe it makes man too much like God that we can create life like this. I think that would be a more fundamental objection. I think we as modern rational people say, no, 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 no. Of course we can create beings that will become human. But a theological objection might be that people shouldn't have this power.
I think one of the ways to look at Liz is that, you know, and the author talks about this, and history has proven it. The Jews are bad because the Jews steal, the Jews are robbed, the Jews do all these things. And she talks about this in the novel. And then you have this kid who's looking at Ava as this golem that I'm supposed to kill, and because she doesn't understand what the potential beauty of the golem is. So I'm willing to kill it in the beginning, but when I learn more about it throughout, I can't now. And I think that's one of the fairy tales that, you know, you have this tale at the very end of what did I learn in this thing is that once I remove the bigotry and my ignorance, I can see something positive in something, and therefore I don't need to kill it because I understand its beauty now. And I really think that is that running metaphor throughout the story with the Ava character and how Leah at the very end changes her mind because she realizes that there's something more beautiful than just this thing that people tell me that is, that I've come to love it. And again, because Liz, like we talked about, right, this is a love story. And that what a great way to, you know, it just has this running metaphor throughout. That's the way I see this part.
Well, certainly Ava becomes human, that she stops being a creation and starts being her own thing, her own, you know, we want to say person, but she's real, like Pinocchio's a real boy, that sort of thing. And so we modern people want her to live. We want there to be a happy ending. And that's, yeah, and that's a tale. Once we get to know people and we see them as what they are, we're not so willing to kill them because we understand that they are human beings. And I think Hoffman does a really good job with that, with this character, like the magical realism end of it.
Okay, I'm gonna show my age and a little bit of my nerddom. When I was a child, I had a favorite cartoon, and it was called The Last Unicorn. And I don't know if anyone else has seen this gem from the early 80s, probably not. And in it, the unicorn, the last one, is transformed into a human for a while in an effort to save the other unicorns. And the longer she stays in this human form, the more human she becomes. She loses a lot of her magic and her uniqueness as a unicorn. And in the end, she ends up being transformed back into her original form. But she is forever changed by the experience of being human, because she said that, you know, before, when she was just this mythical, magical creature, she didn't understand what, you know, guilt was. She didn't have any remorse and things like that. And she was transformed through her humanizing experience. And it's interesting, that story takes it as though the unicorn both gained something and lost something through her humanizing experience. So I can see where perhaps maybe the mother thought that Ava being created in a human form would lose some of her magic and would be trapped as a human. And maybe that was possibly a reason why she would want her to be destroyed so she could return to her magical origins.
I want to watch that show now. All right. I think we are coming up on the end of our time. Melody, did you have any announcements?
I don't know. Is this the end of this cycle of the book series, right? So
yep, we'll be restarting again with a new book in August. We'll be reading Salvaged Pages which is a collection of children's diary entries from the time of the Holocaust. It is a fairly substantially thick book, so you might want to get started now if you'd like to join us for that one.
I recommended that one. Yay.
Hey, I'm sorry, did you say salvaged pages?
Yes, I believe the author is Zapruder or something like that, or the author that compiled the diary entries. All right.
Oh, jinx.
Well, if no one else has anything to add, I think we can wrap it up here.
Thanks y'all for inviting me. Raina, good job.
Yeah, great job,
Thank
Raina.
you.
Thank you all.
All right. Good night.